Hey guys, Sean Bougie here. I want to talk to you guys today about life estates. And some of you are going to run into this. If you're doing any kind of real business out there, you're going to occasionally run into this. You're going to see a lot of this in the South, more so than you will in the North. But what a life estate is, I'm going to give you the best example just to get the idea across of what it is. Let's say my parents needed a house and they didn't have any money. They couldn't qualify. And I'm a good son, and I want to take care of them. Now, I could buy a house, and I could rent it to them, or I could buy a house and just say, go live in it. Or I could give them a life estate. I could buy that house, and then I could give them a life estate. And what that means is they own that property until they die, or an individual, till he dies, she dies, whatever. They are the owners. It's a life estate. They are what's called a life tenant. That means as long as they're alive, they can live in that house and they own that house. And they can, by the way, go into debt on that house and they can sell that house. It's theirs. They are the life tenant. I am what's usually called, in most states, it's called a remainder man. This isn't a life estate. What happens is it'll automatically, upon the death of whoever's on that deed, as the life tenant, upon their death, it will transfer back to me. Now, how does this impact us? Well, there's a couple of ways. Let's talk first about flipping property. In flipping property, and I would talk to your attorney in the state that you're doing business in, but in the vast majority of states, all I'd have to do is get a signature from the life tenant, because they technically own that house until it sells. And by the way, one of the benefits to setting it up this way, instead of just buying a house and having it in my name, having the deed in my name and giving it to my parents, one of the smaller benefits is if I was to go get a mortgage for another property, one of the things the banks would say is, hey, listen, you've got a $3,000 tax bill every year on that other property. We're going to count that against you because that deed is in your name. They will count tax liability on a property against you. Even if you've paid off that property, you don't have any debt against it, they will count that annual tax liability against you. So that's a benefit. The other benefit is if you're in a situation where you bought the house, you want mom and dad to have it, you don't want there to be an argument upon their death about who gets it or who gets to sell it or anything else, there's no argument. It comes back to you. Okay. So let's say we're flipping property. Vast majority of states, I would talk to my attorney first, but all I got to do is get that life tenant to sign that over to me. Now I got to tell you something, guys, about this. If you're working with, primarily you're working with older folks in this case, okay, I would make darn sure that the remainder man knew about it. There's a reason that life tenant needs to sell, or they're behind on taxes and the remainder man hasn't paid up the taxes, the one that's going to get the deed once the life tenant dies. If they haven't paid that off to protect their interest, I would talk to the life tenant. And there's a couple, I'd probably get them to either, if I could, witness the quitclaim deed or whatever type of deed you use that the life tenant did. So I've got their name on there too, or get some kind of an agreement signed with my attorney. And the reason is, guys, you don't want to hear about it later. Oh, my dad, he was incompetent. My mom was incompetent. Oh, they didn't know what they were doing. You don't want this. You don't want this cloud. You don't want this cloud on title. So I would actually talk to remainder man. And 99% of the time, they know what's going on. They do. And it's a risk you take. Yes, they could step up and pay off whatever debt needs to be paid off or help mom and dad more. Well, that's great. Who lost in that case? I lost a little bit of time. So what? On the other side, by doing it, I've covered my tail by letting them know, making sure they know that I know who they are and I've got their okay, even though I don't technically need it, I'm covering my tail. Here's where it gets, and I've said this before, hinky. Let's talk about applying this to surplus funds where the life tenant didn't die, and the property sold, let's say for taxes. Property sells because they haven't paid their tax bill. Life tenant was in it at the time. Let's say it sells for 50 grand. The county was owed 10. and I'm obviously rounding, I'm not including all the different fees, whatever. But let's say there's 40 grand in surplus funds or overage there, excess proceeds, whatever you want to call it. So there's 40 grand in there, okay? How do you get it? Well, the easiest answer is get the signature from both the life tenant who's still alive, the life tenant, and the remainder man. Get the signature from both. Get them to both quit claim deed that property to you. Okay? And I'd probably have an attorney. I would be comfortable writing it up, but if I was you and you haven't done a lot of these, have an attorney write that up. Okay? Because I would reference that life tenant, life estate deed, and I would reference who is the remainder man, and I would reference who the life tenant was, and I'd have them both sign. Seriously. Now, just so you know, you can have them sign separately. Both of them sign their interest over to you separately and record both deeds. That's fine. But here's the deal. Let's say the person was 80, or is 80, the life tenant. It sold last year, created 40,000 in overage. The difficulty comes into how do you split this up? Well, in most states, you use an actuary table. You say, all right, what's the average life expectancy of a person with this demographic in this state, this age, this kind of health issues, whatever you can throw in there, whatever is on an actuary table you can throw in there. And they may say, okay, the average age is 85. All right, that they die. The average age at time of death for this individual because of their characteristics, their demographics, and so forth. Okay, well, if that's the case, let me make it easier. Let's say it's 100. I know that's not right, but let's say it's 100. You can say, all right, they're 80 right now, so they've lived 80% of their life. They had that property completely in their name as a life tenant, and they, at the time of the sale, but they only have 20% of their life left. Honestly, this is how they do it a lot of times. So they'll get 20% of the surplus. The remainder man will get the other percentage. I would talk to your attorney locally. Obviously, guys, this stuff is regional. But one more thing I want to bring up with the life tenant, life estate. With a life estate, you do have to trust the person giving it has to trust the person that's taking it. You can also limit it, by the way, that, okay, I'm not gonna allow you to take debt. What I would do if I was doing this for my parents and I was concerned, if I was going to buy a house for them and give them a life estate, they were going to be life tenants, I was going to be the remainder man. What I would do is also have them sign a mortgage to me. Okay? And what it would be is I would literally put right in that mortgage, hey, Sean bought the house for us, here's what it's worth at the time, so the mortgage is for this much money. So at least I'm protected on the value of the property at the time of the sale. And I'd say it's 0% interest, no payments for, until the tenant is deceased. I just put it on there. And what that would do by recording that, and guys, be upfront. Don't play games and say, oh, it's 6% interest and I gave him $50,000. Tell the truth. Put that in the mortgage. That way, if you're concerned that your parents would go into debt and use the property as their piggy bank, nobody's going to give them a loan against that property. They're not. They might be able to pick up a small equity line, but at least you're protected on the majority of the value of the equity of that house. So that should help you quite a bit. Anyway, hope this helps you guys understand what a life estate is. I have friends that have used life estates to buy property. They was going to tax sale. The property was going to tax sale. They knocked on the door. There were 20 cards on the door. Everybody was trying to get the house. It was in Dilworth, Charlotte, North Carolina, in a condo. Older lady behind the door. He's knocking on the door. And she says, go away. I know you're trying to take my house away from me. He goes, no, I'm not. And he figured it out. Right then, he figured out. Brilliant guy. He figured out what she needed. He said, look, I will pay off the taxes. I'll give you a life estate, and I will pay your HOA dues for this condo and the taxes going forward, and you can live here for free, okay, until you die. And I'll handle that. I'll handle the HOA fees, and I'll handle the taxes. And she came to the door. And the reason he had said that, first of all, just so you know, guys, she was quite elderly. Okay, if this was a 30-year-old person, I wouldn't get. Are you crazy? But she was elderly, and he actually did want to help her. And basically, for about 3 years, she lived in that house for free. Then she passed away. It went back to him. He had to pay HOA fees and all that. But the thing is, the property was paid off, guys. It was just taxes owed against it. It was paid off. It was in Dilworth, North Carolina. It was worth 160 as is, $160,000, and I think he had a total, all said and done, 40,000 at the end of the 3 years. Heck of a hit. And you know what? Nobody lost. She got what she wanted. She didn't have to move. She lived there for free for the rest of her days.